Have you ever watched someone who was absolutely right lose an argument simply because they couldn't keep their emotions in check? Their voice trembled, their face flushed, and just like that, all their perfectly valid points dissolved into thin air. Has this ever happened to you? Think about it. How many times have you walked away from a confrontation knowing you had all the facts, all the logic, and still somehow ended up appearing weak or unconvincing? The truth is, winning any confrontation isn't about who has the better argument. It's about who maintains better control. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world, and if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. In today's world of constant challenges and confrontations, mastering your emotional response isn't just helpful, it's essential. What if I told you that the greatest minds in history, including the legendary strategist Machiavelli, understood a fundamental truth that most people still miss today? Stay with me until the end of this video, because what you're about to discover might completely transform how you handle every difficult interaction in your life. Machiavelli, through his meticulous study of power and influence, recognized something profound. True power never belongs to the loudest or most aggressive person in the room. Real, lasting power belongs to the one who stays perfectly calm when everyone else breaks. Think about the people you truly respect. Aren't they the ones who maintain their composure even when chaos erupts around them? This isn't just philosophical theory, it's practical psychology. When you lose control of your emotions during any confrontation, you immediately sacrifice your position of strength. Your body language changes, your voice shifts, and everyone watching makes an instant, often unconscious judgment. This person cannot be trusted with power. But here's where it gets interesting. Machiavelli discovered what might be the most brutal truth about influence. If you cannot control yourself, you cannot control anything else, not the situation, not other people's perceptions, not the outcome, nothing. Self-mastery precedes all other forms of mastery. Your ability to maintain cold, calculated composure when others try to provoke you isn't just a nice skill to have. It's the foundation of all personal power. What's fascinating is how this principle manifests in everyday life. That promotion you were overlooked for, it likely went to someone who demonstrated emotional stability under pressure. That negotiation you lost, your opponent probably maintained better composure, giving them the upper hand. That relationship conflict that spiraled out of control, emotions hijacked what could have been a productive conversation. Now imagine walking into every confrontation with an unshakable mental clarity that nothing, not insults, not pressure, not unexpected challenges, can disturb. Imagine knowing exactly how to maintain perfect composure when someone tries to provoke you into losing control. This mental state isn't just powerful, it's transformative. If you want to master the art of mental control in challenging situations, hit the subscribe button now. I share powerful insights like these that can transform how you handle confrontations in both your personal and professional life. What most people fail to realize is that during any confrontation, a profound transformation happens in how others perceive you, and it has almost nothing to do with your words. The hidden truth is that humans aren't primarily logical creatures. We're instinctual ones. When someone is facing you in a heated moment, they aren't carefully processing your explanations or analyzing your logic. They're reading your body language with an almost primal intensity. Your steadiness speaks volumes before a single word leaves your mouth. The micro movements of your face, the subtle shifts in your breathing pattern, the stability of your voice, these are the real carriers of credibility. I've witnessed countless brilliant arguments collapse simply because the person delivering them couldn't maintain physical composure. Their voice quivered, their hands fidgeted, and in that moment, their expertise became irrelevant. Machiavelli's insights on this subject reveal a fundamental aspect of human psychology that still rings true centuries later. He wrote, "Men are governed by appearances as much as by reality." This isn't cynical, it's a profound revelation about the nature of influence. The journey toward mastering confrontation begins with acknowledging this truth. How you appear during a challenging moment carries equal weight to whether you're actually correct. Think of it as the theater of power. When two people argue, one with perfect facts but shaky delivery versus someone with half-correct information but unwavering composure, witnesses almost invariably trust the calm one. This isn't irrational, it's deeply embedded in our decision-making framework. Steadiness signals confidence, and confidence implies knowledge. The impact of this psychological mechanism cannot be overstated. When you remain perfectly calm during conflict, you create a fascinating effect in the minds of others. Your stillness projects a sense of reliability that transcends the actual content of your words. People begin to assume you know something they don't, that you possess some deeper understanding of the situation that allows you to remain unruffled while everyone else spirals into emotional chaos. Conversely, nervousness broadcasts weakness with stunning efficiency. Even slight signs of agitation, a tapping foot, darting eyes, or rushed speech, undermine your position regardless of how valid your points might be. The mindset behind your delivery becomes more important than the delivery itself. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining what actually happens in your body during confrontation, and how gaining control of these physiological responses gives you an almost unfair advantage in any high-pressure situation. The body-mind connection here reveals something extraordinary about human influence that few ever master. If you're recognizing these patterns in your own interactions, write in the comments. Steadiness speaks louder than words. I'm curious how many of you have noticed this dynamic playing out in your professional and personal lives. The revelation that transforms how you handle challenging encounters is this. When someone confronts you, your brain's natural instinct is to defend, to justify, explain, or counterattack. But this instinct often betrays you. The blueprint for true influence requires a complete paradigm shift. Your first job isn't defense, it's maintaining steadiness. Consider the fundamental difference between these two approaches. When you focus on defending yourself, your attention scatters, your nervous system activates, and your delivery often suffers regardless of how right you might be. But when you prioritize steadiness first, something remarkable happens. You maintain presence, and presence creates space for influence. This counterintuitive principle applies across every domain of life. In business negotiations, heated arguments with loved ones, or even casual disagreements, a calm tone makes you appear credible even without having the perfect response ready. The mindset behind this approach isn't about appearing superior, it's about creating an environment where genuine communication becomes possible. I've witnessed this phenomenon countless times behind the scenes of high-stakes encounters. In job interviews, for example, candidates often rush to answer difficult questions, speaking too quickly and projecting insecurity. The ones who stand out take a different path. They pause, breathe, and respond with, "That's a great question. Let me think about that for a second." Then they actually take that second, maintaining eye contact and composure. This brief moment of reflection signals something profound to the interviewer. This person is confident enough to think before speaking. They value accuracy over speed. They're comfortable with silence. These non-verbal cues create a cascade of positive judgments about character and capability that often outweigh the actual content of the answer. The journey toward mastering this skill begins with embracing a powerful truth. Your presence matters more than your perfect answers. Your composure carries more weight than your logic. This isn't merely about impression management. It's about understanding the architecture of human trust. When you remain steady, people trust you, even when they disagree with your position. The decision to follow someone, to believe someone, to align with someone happens at a level deeper than rational agreement. What we're discussing isn't merely a communication technique, it's a revelation about human nature that Machiavelli understood centuries ago, and that modern psychology continues to validate. The steadiness you maintain in difficult moments becomes the foundation upon which all your other qualities, intelligence, expertise, charisma, can actually matter to others. Let's explore now what happens at the physiological level when you're challenged, and how mastering your body's response gives you an almost supernatural ability to maintain this crucial steadiness under pressure. Understanding these mechanisms offers a window into why most people crack precisely when steadiness would serve them most. If you've ever felt your body betraying you in important moments, write in the comments, steadiness before defense. I'm curious how many of you recognize this pattern in your own experiences. What most people don't realize is that your body functions as a living billboard, constantly broadcasting your internal state to everyone around you. This revelation transforms how we understand influence in critical moments. Within mere seconds of interaction, others subconsciously scan your physical signals and make instant judgments about your credibility, confidence, and power. The subtle tremor in your hands, the rapid darting of your eyes, a voice that rushes or breaks, these microscopic betrayals tell a story your words can never erase. Think about the last high-stakes conversation you had. Behind the scenes, your body was either reinforcing or undermining every syllable you spoke. Crossed arms signal defensiveness. Fidgeting fingers broadcast anxiety. A posture that shifts weight repeatedly reveals uncertainty. These aren't minor details. They're the primary data others use to decide whether to trust you, believe you, or follow your lead. Machiavelli's insight on this subject reveals something profound about human psychology. Men judge more by the eye than by the hand. The essence of this wisdom is that visual impressions dominate verbal arguments in the hierarchy of persuasion. What people see in your physical composure forms their impression before your words have a chance to register. This isn't a modern development, it's hardwired into our evolutionary blueprint as social creatures. Consider the journey of information as it travels between two people. Your carefully constructed arguments must first pass through the filter of how you appear while delivering them. If that filter is clouded by physical signs of doubt, fear, or agitation, even the most brilliant logic arrives tainted. The impact of this principle cannot be overstated. Mastering your physical presence isn't optional if you seek to influence others in meaningful ways. Here's where the most powerful transformation in this process occurs, in understanding the correct sequence of control. Most people approach this challenge backward. They attempt to calm their racing thoughts first, hoping their body will eventually follow. But the science of embodied cognition reveals a counterintuitive truth. Controlling your body is the gateway to controlling your mind. This reversal in approach changes everything. Your brain constantly monitors your physical state, using it as a primary data source to determine appropriate emotional responses. When you deliberately slow your breathing, straighten your posture, or steady your hands, you're not just putting on a show for others, you're sending powerful signals to your own nervous system. Your brain essentially thinks, my body is calm, so the situation must not be threatening. This creates a virtuous cycle where physical composure generates mental clarity. The mindset shift required here is substantial. Instead of waiting to feel confident before appearing confident, you must appear confident first. and your feelings will adjust accordingly. This isn't deception, it's understanding the actual mechanics of how your consciousness operates. The blueprint for self-mastery begins with recognizing that the body-mind relationship works in both directions, but the body offers the more accessible entry point. Let's now explore the specific breathing techniques that can instantly disrupt stress responses, even in the most heated confrontations. These physiological interventions provide an immediate reset button for your nervous system when you need it most. If you've ever noticed how your physical state influences your mental clarity, write in the comments. Body leads, mind follows. I'm curious how many of you have experienced this connection firsthand. The reason even intelligent people say foolish things during confrontations stems from a fascinating neurological reality. When stress hits your system, a silent coup takes place inside your brain. Your shallow, rapid breathing sends an urgent signal throughout your nervous system. Danger is present. This trigger activates a cascade of biological responses that fundamentally alter how you think. What happens next reveals the hidden architecture of your decision-making process. Your prefrontal cortex, the evolutionary marvel responsible for logical thinking, nuanced reasoning, and strategic planning, essentially goes offline. Meanwhile, your amygdala, the primitive structure handling fear responses, seizes control of your mental dashboard. This neurological hijacking explains why people with brilliant minds can suddenly make catastrophic statements in heated moments. They're literally not thinking with their full brain. Subscribe to this channel if you're serious about developing unshakable composure. Each video provides you with practical strategies to maintain control when others lose theirs. The revelation that transforms this vulnerability into strength is that you can interrupt this process through deliberate breathing control. When you feel tension rising, perhaps your heart racing or your face flushing, this becomes your cue to implement the reset protocol. Slow your breathing intentionally. Inhale deeply through your nose for a count of 4, then exhale slowly through your mouth for a count of 6. This isn't merely a relaxation technique, it's a direct intervention in your neurochemistry. The science behind this approach reveals something profound about human biology. By breathing from your belly rather than your chest, you activate your parasympathetic nervous system, your body's built-in calming mechanism. This immediately begins lowering your heart rate and blood pressure while sending powerful safety signals to your brain. The impact is remarkable. Your prefrontal cortex comes back online, allowing clear thinking precisely when you need it most. Beyond breathing, your physical posture creates another dimension of influence, both over others' perceptions and your internal state. The blueprint for projecting confidence through posture isn't about dominating space aggressively. It's about establishing a solid foundation that communicates stability. When standing, plant your feet shoulder-width apart, distributing weight evenly rather than shifting nervously from leg to leg. When sitting, align your spine naturally without rigidity, keeping shoulders relaxed but not slumped forward. The mindset transformation occurs when you recognize that posture operates bidirectionally. It both reflects and creates your internal condition. Research from embodied cognition demonstrates that adopting powerful postures for even 2 minutes significantly increases testosterone, confidence hormone, while decreasing cortisol, stress hormone. Your body position isn't just signaling confidence to others, it's actually manufacturing confidence within your biochemistry. This postural awareness becomes especially critical during confrontations when your instinct might be to physically contract, crossing arms, hunching shoulders, or making yourself smaller. These protective postures paradoxically increase your sense of vulnerability by signaling to your brain that you need protection. By deliberately maintaining an open, grounded posture, you create a virtuous cycle where your body tells your brain you're safe and your brain then generates the emotional stability to match. Let's explore now how controlling the micro movements of your hands and eyes sends powerful signals of competence that others subconsciously register and respond to. These subtle adjustments in your physical presence can dramatically alter how your messages are received. If you've tried conscious breathing during tense situations, comment below with "Breath is power." I'm curious how many of you have experienced the immediate clarity this simple technique provides. The micro movements of your hands tell a story far more powerful than most realize. Your hands serve as emotional beacons, constantly broadcasting your internal landscape to everyone watching. When you fidget with a pen, adjust your clothing, or touch your face repeatedly, you're not just moving, you're revealing vulnerability. The revelation that transforms how others perceive you is deceptively simple. Keep your hands visible and still. This stillness isn't about appearing rigid or lifeless. It's about demonstrating complete self-possession. Place your hands calmly on the table, rest them in your lap, or position them naturally at your sides. The impact of this simple adjustment is remarkable. Every unnecessary movement eliminated from your gestural vocabulary strengthens the impression of someone in complete command of themselves. Behind the scenes of influential interactions, this controlled presence doesn't just change how others see you, it fundamentally alters how you feel inside, creating a feedback loop where external stillness generates internal calm. Your voice carries equal weight in this equation of influence. When stress or anger infiltrates your system, your speech patterns undergo a dramatic transformation. Your pace accelerates, pitch elevates, and volume fluctuates unpredictably. This vocal signature instantly broadcasts uncertainty, regardless of your actual confidence in what you're saying. The pathway to vocal authority requires a deliberate recalibration. Slow your speech to approximately 70% of your normal speed. This measured delivery creates a fascinating psychological effect. By slightly lowering your pitch and maintaining steady volume throughout your statements, you project an almost magnetic authority. The mindset behind this approach isn't manipulation. It's understanding that your delivery directly impacts how your message resonates. When you speak with unhurried intention, others instinctively assign greater weight to your words. They perceive depth, consideration, and certainty in your statements, even on topics where you might feel less confident. Perhaps the most counterintuitive element in this journey of transformation is learning to leverage silence strategically. Most people experience profound discomfort with conversational gaps and rush to fill them with words, nervous laughter, or filler sounds. This impulse betrays a fundamental insecurity. True power lies in embracing deliberate pauses, not as moments to endure, but as tools to deploy. When you pause intentionally after making an important point or when asked a challenging question, something remarkable happens. That silence creates tension, a vacuum that others feel compelled to fill. As they begin speaking to alleviate their own discomfort, the dynamics of the exchange shift. You're no longer defending, you're observing. You're no longer reacting, you're directing. This strategic use of silence doesn't stem from arrogance, but from the profound recognition that words gain power when carefully rationed. The blueprint for mastering this approach involves practicing comfort with silence in low-stakes situations first. Notice your impulse to fill gaps in casual conversations, then deliberately override that impulse. The decisiveness to remain silent when others would speak creates an almost magnetic pull on attention. Let's explore how remaining calm while someone else becomes emotional creates a psychological phenomenon where they begin questioning their own reaction, one of the most powerful dynamics in any confrontation. If you've noticed how calm, measured speech affects how others receive your message, type in the comments, "Slow is powerful." I'm curious how many of you have discovered this principle in your own interactions. One of the most fascinating psychological phenomena occurs when you maintain perfect calm while someone else is visibly emotional. This creates a profound cognitive dissonance in their mind, a mental conflict that subtly shifts the power dynamics of any interaction. They approach the confrontation with an unconscious expectation. They're emotionally charged, so you should match that intensity. When you don't fulfill this expectation, when you remain steady, measured, and composed, something remarkable happens within their psychological framework. Their brain struggles to reconcile this mismatch. Why aren't they as upset as I am? Do they know something I don't? Am I overreacting? This internal questioning creates a momentary disruption in their certainty. The revelation here isn't about manipulating others. It's about understanding that your composure creates space for reflection where none existed before. Your steadiness becomes a mirror in which they suddenly see their own emotional state from an outside perspective. This subtle shift in awareness often leads to a de-escalation that words alone could never achieve. I've witnessed countless confrontations transform when one person simply refused to match the emotional temperature of the other. The intensity that initially seemed so justified begins to feel disproportionate when not reflected back. This is how composure becomes its own form of influence, not by domination, but by contrast. The journey toward this level of control requires understanding what happens when we take things personally. That instant flash of heat in your chest, the tightening of your throat, the defensive thoughts that surge forward. These aren't just feelings. They represent a complete transformation in how your brain processes information. The moment criticism or conflict becomes personal, strategic thinking evaporates. Your perspective narrows dramatically, focused entirely on defending your ego rather than advancing your actual interests. This emotional hijacking explains why even brilliant people make terrible decisions when feeling attacked. They're no longer operating from their full cognitive capacity. They're operating from a primitive defensive stance. The blueprint for overcoming this vulnerability lies in cultivating what might be your most powerful mental asset. Detachment. Detachment is widely misunderstood as not caring or becoming emotionally cold. The truth reveals something much more nuanced and powerful. True detachment means caring deeply about outcomes while refusing to let emotions hijack your thinking precisely when clarity matters most. It's the ability to mentally step back from a situation even while physically remaining in it. To see the interaction as an observer rather than experiencing it solely as a participant. This mindset transformation allows you to ask different questions. What's actually happening here? What does this person really want? What outcome would serve my genuine interests? Rather than the ego-driven questions that dominate when taking things personally. How dare they? Don't they know who I am? How can I prove them wrong? Let's explore now how Machiavelli's insight that a wise man acts as he must, not as he feels, provides a fundamental principle for maintaining control in even the most challenging confrontations, and how this principle creates a decisive advantage in both personal and professional interactions. If you've ever noticed yourself getting trapped in taking things personally, write in the comments, "Detachment creates clarity." I'm curious how many of you have recognized this pattern in your own reactions. Machiavelli's insight that a wise man acts as he must, not as he feels, reveals a profound truth about influence and power. This principle creates a fundamental transformation in how you approach confrontations. Most people make decisions based on what provides immediate emotional relief, what feels satisfying in the moment. But this instinctive path rarely serves your authentic long-term interests. The blueprint for true power requires something more nuanced, choosing responses based on desired outcomes rather than emotional validation. This mindset shift separates those who merely react to life from those who strategically shape it. Consider a scenario where someone criticizes your work in front of colleagues. Your emotional impulse might drive you to defend vigorously, point out their mistakes, or return criticism, all of which might feel temporarily satisfying. But the wiser path often involves considering what response will actually advance your position over time. Behind the scenes of every interaction lies this critical decision point. The revelation that changes everything is learning to treat criticism not as personal attacks requiring defense, but simply as information requiring evaluation. This perspective shift completely alters the energy of confrontational exchanges. When someone says, "Your approach won't work," rather than immediately explaining why they're wrong, practice detachment by viewing their comment objectively. "That's interesting. What specific concerns do you have?" This approach creates several powerful advantages. First, it diffuses tension immediately. The critic expected defensive pushback and instead received curious engagement. Second, it positions you as the more reasonable party. Third, and perhaps most valuable, it might reveal legitimate concerns you hadn't considered. The journey toward influence begins with recognizing that criticism often contains useful data, regardless of how poorly it might be delivered. The contrast between strategic and emotional responses becomes even more striking when you observe their different trajectories. Emotional reactions typically escalate tension. They prompt the other person to double down on their position, creating a cycle of increasing hostility where neither party can back down without losing face. The impact of this dynamic extends far beyond the immediate argument, often damaging relationships permanently. Strategic responses follow an entirely different path. By acknowledging concerns and asking questions rather than defending, you shift the entire interaction from confrontation toward collaborative problem solving. This doesn't mean surrendering your position, quite the opposite. It means advancing your position through wiser means. The decisions you make in these critical moments reveal your true understanding of influence. Consider how this principle applies in professional settings. When a team member challenges your idea, responding with, "That's a valid concern. Help me understand what specifically worries you about this approach," creates space for genuine dialogue. Their objection becomes a starting point for refinement rather than a battle to be won. This transformation from adversaries to collaborators doesn't happen by accident. It happens by design, through deliberate control of your responses. Let's examine now how detachment creates a powerful ability to prevent saying things you'll later regret, and how this single skill might be the most valuable aspect of emotional control in both personal and professional relationships. If you've caught yourself choosing emotional satisfaction over strategic outcomes, write in the comments. Strategy over emotion. I'm curious how many of you recognize this pattern in your own decision-making. One of the most painful realizations in life comes when we look back at things said in heated moments. Words that damaged relationships, undermined credibility, or revealed vulnerabilities we never intended to share. The hidden truth behind these regrettable moments is that they almost always stem from the same root cause: emotional reactions. Overwhelming strategic thinking. When emotions drive your responses, you speak to satisfy immediate feelings rather than to serve your genuine long-term interests. Detachment offers a profound transformation in this pattern. It creates a mental sanctuary, a space of clarity between the trigger and your response. This isn't about becoming emotionally cold. It's about developing the awareness to ask crucial questions before speaking. Will these words move me toward or away from what I truly want? How might they be received? Will I regret this tomorrow? The journey toward mastery requires recognizing that once words leave your mouth, No apology or explanation can fully undo their impact. This principle becomes especially vital in professional environments where a single emotional outburst can undermine years of carefully built reputation. Behind the scenes of every successful negotiator, leader, or diplomat lies this fundamental skill: the ability to feel emotions fully while speaking, from a place of strategic clarity rather than emotional urgency. The revelation that changes everything is understanding where your true power resides, in the tiny pause between stimulus and response. Viktor Frankl, who endured unimaginable suffering in concentration camps, identified this space as the foundation of human freedom. In that microscopic moment, that breath between what happens to you and how you respond, lies the difference between being controlled by circumstances and controlling your path through them. When someone challenges you, that pause represents a decisive fork in the road. One direction leads to reaction, the automatic, unfiltered response that often creates regret. The other leads to choice, the thoughtful, intentional response that maintains your power and advances your position. The mindset shift required here is substantial, viewing that pause not as hesitation, but as the very source of your influence in any confrontation. This awareness becomes particularly valuable when facing deliberate provocation. When someone insults or disrespects you publicly, recognizing the true nature of what's happening creates an immediate advantage. Often, their behavior isn't really about you at all. It's an attempt to provoke an emotional reaction they can then use against you. By seeing this dynamic clearly, you gain the freedom to choose a more powerful response. Rather than giving them the reaction they seek, you respond with calm detachment or minimal engagement. Interesting perspective, thanks for sharing. Then you move on, as though their attempt to provoke you barely registered. The impact of this approach is devastating to would-be agitators. Their strategy relied entirely on your emotional reaction. When you deny them that satisfaction, they're left holding an empty hand while you maintain both your composure and dignity. Let's examine now how calmness in chaos doesn't just protect you, it actually transforms you into the center of gravity in any room, creating a powerful influence that draws others toward your steadiness when everything around them feels unstable. If you've ever said something in the heat of the moment that you later regretted, drop a comment saying, "The pause is power." I'm curious how many of us have learned this lesson the hard way. There's a fascinating paradox in how influence operates in group settings. When chaos erupts, when voices rise, emotions flare, and energy becomes frenetic, the person who commands the most attention isn't necessarily the loudest. In fact, the opposite often proves true. Your calmness creates a striking contrast that draws others toward you like a magnet. This phenomenon explains why in rooms full of noise, the person who speaks with measured quietness often gains the floor most effectively. This dynamic reveals something profound about human psychology. We're naturally wired to notice contrast, the element that doesn't match the pattern. When everyone around you is speaking, rapidly, moving frantically and projecting anxiety, your stillness becomes the most noticeable feature in the environment. The transformation this creates in how others perceive you is immediate and powerful. Without saying a word about your capabilities, your composure silently broadcasts competence and control. What happens next unveils the hidden architecture of leadership. As you maintain this calm center amid the storm, something remarkable begins to occur. Others unconsciously start calibrating their behavior to match yours. Their voices gradually lower, their breathing slows, their posture shifts to mirror your stability. This mirroring effect isn't random, it's a deeply embedded social behavior through which humans naturally align themselves with whoever appears most in control of themselves. The revelation here changes how we understand leadership entirely. even without formal authority, without a title, without seniority, without being the designated person in charge. You become the psychological anchor in the room. People begin looking to you for direction, reassurance, and guidance. Their eyes track your reactions to gauge appropriate responses. This natural gravitation towards steadiness represents one of the most powerful principles in human influence. Machiavelli's insight on this subject reveals a truth that most organizational structures still fail to recognize. True authority isn't something conferred by titles or positions in a hierarchy. Real authority is taken by whoever commands presence in critical moments. The blueprint for this kind of presence isn't aggression, dominance, or even charisma. It's composed steadiness that signals complete self-possession. Consider how this principle operates in crisis situations. When unexpected problems arise, when tensions peak, when deadlines loom, observe who people actually turn to. Rarely is it simply the person with the highest title. More often, it's whoever demonstrates the most emotional stability and clear thinking under pressure. This person becomes the de facto leader, regardless of where they sit on the organizational chart. The mindset shift required to leverage this dynamic isn't about positioning yourself above others. It's about cultivating such complete internal control that external chaos cannot disturb your center. When you achieve this state, leadership isn't something you pursue. It's something that naturally flows toward you in precisely the moments when influence matters most. Let's explore now the fascinating psychological phenomenon where your calmness doesn't just set you apart, it actually creates an illusion of competence that makes others assume you know more than you might in that moment, and how this perception dramatically shifts the power dynamics in your favor. If you've ever noticed how people naturally turn to the calmest person in a crisis, drop a comment saying, "Calm is magnetic." I'm curious how many of you have witnessed this leadership principle in action. One of the most powerful revelations about human psychology is that you don't actually need to have all the answers or be the smartest person in the room to be perceived as competent. What you need, perhaps all you need, is calmness. This creates what psychologists sometimes call the competence halo effect, where your composed demeanor leads others to make favorable assumptions about your knowledge, expertise, and decision-making abilities. This phenomenon operates largely below conscious awareness, but dramatically shapes how others respond to you. The transformation this creates in your interactions is remarkable. When you remain steady, while others display visible anxiety or uncertainty, people naturally begin to defer to your judgment. They seek your opinion more frequently, look to you for approval before proceeding, and give greater weight to your suggestions. This doesn't happen because you've claimed authority or demonstrated superior expertise. It happens simply because your composure creates an impression of someone who knows something others don't. This principle reveals something profound about the architecture of influence. The leverage gained through calmness isn't about manipulation or control over others. It's about positioning yourself to guide situations toward genuinely better outcomes for everyone involved. When tensions escalate and emotions run high, rational thinking diminishes across the group. In these moments, your composed presence creates a pocket of clarity from which more productive solutions can emerge. With this leverage, you can de-escalate conflicts that might otherwise spiral, propose alternatives that might otherwise be dismissed, and create space for cooler minds to prevail. The journey toward mastering this approach begins with recognizing that your calm isn't just protecting you, it's creating an opportunity to elevate the entire interaction. This isn't power over others, it's power with others. Machiavelli's insights on perception reveal a truth that modern psychology has only recently begun to fully appreciate. How you're perceived often matters more than what you actually are. His observation that men in general judge more by the eyes than by the hands speaks to a fundamental aspect of human decision-making. People form judgments based primarily on what they can see and feel, not on objective assessment of hidden qualities or intentions. A leader who appears calm is trusted even when internally uncertain or struggling. This isn't deception. It's understanding the reality of how human trust operates. Behind the scenes of every influential relationship, perception shapes the landscape of possibilities more than unseen reality. People make decisions based on what they observe, not on what might be true, but invisible to them. This principle explains why composed people often advance more rapidly in organizations than those with equal or even superior technical skills, but less emotional control. The mindset shift required to leverage this dynamic isn't about creating false impressions. It's about ensuring your external presentation aligns with your best internal qualities rather than your momentary emotional states. Let's explore now how calmness in emotional confrontations, particularly with people you care about, creates a fascinating dynamic where your steadiness eventually affects their emotional state, transforming heated arguments into productive conversations through the power of contrast. If you've noticed how people make assumptions about your competence based on your composure, comment below with "calm creates credibility." I'm curious how many of you have experienced this perception effect in your professional or personal lives. In the most intimate confrontations, arguments with partners, family members, or close friends, your calmness creates a fascinating psychological transformation. When emotions flare and voices rise, your steady presence initially might seem ineffective or even frustrating to the other person. They're expressing intense feelings, and your composure might momentarily make them feel unheard or dismissed. But if you maintain that steadiness without disengaging emotionally, something remarkable begins to unfold. After their initial emotional surge, they suddenly become aware of the contrast between their state and yours. This awareness creates a subtle discomfort. They begin feeling self-conscious about being the only emotional one in the exchange. This isn't manipulation, it's simply the natural human tendency toward emotional calibration. The revelation here is that your calmness doesn't just protect you, it eventually creates space where genuine problem-solving becomes possible once heightened emotions subside. This dynamic plays out constantly behind the scenes of relationships. The person who can maintain composure during conflict ultimately gains the opportunity to guide the conversation toward resolution rather than mutual hurt. The impact extends far beyond the immediate argument, subtly reshaping how you communicate with each other over time. While this approach works powerfully in individual moments, the true transformation occurs when you practice it consistently. Staying calm once in one heated meeting or tense family gathering is valuable for that specific situation. But the journey toward true influence requires something more profound: consistency across all situations over time. This is where behavior transforms into character, and character crystallizes into identity. Consider the difference in how people perceive someone who occasionally maintains composure versus someone who consistently remains unshakable. The occasional display might be dismissed as coincidence. Perhaps you weren't invested in the outcome, or you were just in a good mood that day. People don't assign you special credit for isolated instances of composure. But when you demonstrate this steadiness repeatedly, in every challenging conversation, every crisis, every pressure moment, people begin labeling you differently. That label, unshakable, becomes your reputation, and your reputation becomes perhaps your most valuable asset. It doesn't happen quickly. It requires passing countless tests where others expect you to break, to lose control, to match their emotional intensity. Each time you defy these expectations, you add another layer to the protective shield your reputation constructs around you. The most fascinating aspect of this process is how your reputation eventually begins working for you even when you're not present. When you've established yourself as someone who never loses composure under pressure, people literally stop trying to provoke you. They recognize that raising their voice, using aggressive tactics, or attempting emotional manipulation simply won't work with you. So they don't waste their energy. Instead, they approach you differently, with greater respect, professionalism, and their own best behavior. This represents one of the most powerful mindset shifts available. Understanding that your consistent calmness doesn't just help you navigate individual confrontations, it fundamentally changes how people interact with you before confrontation even begins. Let's explore now how Machiavelli understood the difference between consistency and inconsistency in leadership, and why predictability, even when sometimes uncomfortable, builds deeper trust than erratic behavior, regardless of intention. If you've noticed your composure in difficult moments influencing how others approach you over time, share in the comments. Consistency creates reputation. I'm curious how many of you have experienced this powerful transformation in your relationships. Machiavelli's studies of leadership revealed a profound insight that separates those who maintain influence over time from those who quickly fade. Consistency creates a foundation of trust that nothing else can replace. When people know exactly what to expect from you, how you'll respond under pressure, how you'll handle disagreement, how you'll process criticism, they develop a deeper trust in your character. The revelation here transforms how we understand influence. Even when others don't agree with your decisions, they respect the predictability of your behavior. Consider the difference between someone whose reactions swing wildly from day to day and someone whose composure remains constant. The erratic person might be brilliant, charismatic, or technically skilled, but others approach them with caution, never quite certain which version they'll encounter. This uncertainty creates a subtle but persistent anxiety in every interaction. The consistent person, however, creates a psychological safety that allows others to engage more authentically, without the defensive posture uncertainty requires. This blueprint for building trust doesn't develop overnight. The journey toward an unshakable reputation demands unwavering commitment over extended periods. Perhaps the most challenging aspect of this path is understanding that a single major loss of control can undermine months or even years of steady behavior. The mindset behind this reality isn't about fairness, it's about how human memory operates. Our brains give disproportionate weight to outlier events, especially emotional outbursts. People will remember the one time you lost composure in a meeting more vividly than the 50 times you maintained perfect calm. This isn't a reason for discouragement, it's simply the terrain you must navigate. The commitment required isn't partial or conditional, it must be total. Each successful navigation through a challenging situation strengthens your reputation, while each failure requires rebuilding trust from a lower position than where you started. One of the most significant misunderstandings about emotional control involves what it actually means to remain unshaken. The transformation in understanding comes when you recognize that being unshakable doesn't mean becoming emotionless or cold. It means experiencing emotions fully while not allowing them to dictate your behavior. This distinction changes everything. You can feel frustrated, disappointed, or even angry while still speaking calmly, thinking clearly, and maintaining your presence. The focus isn't on suppressing feelings. It's on developing the capacity to feel them without being controlled by them. This represents one of the highest forms of emotional intelligence, the ability to acknowledge your internal experience while choosing your external expression based on your actual goals rather than momentary impulses. Perhaps Machiavelli's most famous observation was that it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But there exists a third path, one that transcends both fear and love. When you develop a reputation for unwavering composure under pressure, you earn something more valuable than either: genuine respect. Fear diminishes when you're not physically present to enforce it. Love fluctuates with changing emotions and circumstances. But respect for someone who demonstrates consistent self-mastery endures through nearly any challenge. Let's explore now the practical daily habits that actually build this capacity for emotional control. The behind-the-scenes practices that transform these principles from theoretical understanding to embodied reality in high-pressure moments. If you recognize the lasting power of respect over both fear and love, share in the comments. Respect endures. I'm curious how many of you have witnessed the enduring influence of those who maintain composure rather than demanding compliance or affection. As we've explored Machiavelli's wisdom on maintaining composure, I hope you've recognized moments in your own life where these principles could transform how others perceive and respond to you. The journey toward unshakable composure isn't about perfection. It's about consistent practice and gradual mastery of your responses under pressure. If you've found value in understanding these psychological dynamics, consider subscribing to this channel where we regularly unpack the hidden architecture of influence, power, and personal mastery. I create these videos to provide insights that actually change how you navigate challenging situations, not just theoretical concepts. Without practical application, I'd appreciate you leaving a like on this video. It helps others discover this content who might be struggling with the very challenges we've discussed today. And if you've made it all the way through, drop a comment saying, "Cold mind, warm power," so I know you're committed to this journey of self-mastery. The principles we've explored today connect directly to emotional intelligence in leadership situations. I've created a video right here that examines how top performers maintain clarity under intense pressure. Click and continue with me there as we build on what you've learned today about staying mentally cold when others try to provoke you. Remember, in every confrontation, the person who maintains control of themselves ultimately gains control of the situation. Your composure is your most powerful asset. I'll see you in the next video.